You can't convince a believer of anything because their belief is not based on evidence, but on a deep-seated need to believe. Carl Sagan. Today's intelligent design advocates are more sophisticated than their predecessors, but their arguments are not fundamentally different. They criticize evolution by trying to demonstrate that it could not account for life as we know it, and then insist that the only tenable alternative is that life was designed by an unidentified intelligence. John Rennie, 15 Answers to Creationism Nonsense. The process of fossilization destroys 99% of the bones and shells of most organisms. So, less than 1% of all the species that have ever lived are preserved as fossils. And then they have the great luck to be spotted over the last 200 years when a paleontologist happens to be out collecting. The last question at the end of a conference lecture presentation where Neil deGrasse Tyson was asked to comment. A religious troll. Quote, I read a book, The Consolation of Philosophy. Boethius, the philosopher, a very popular book from the time it was published in about 400 AD, all the way through the Middle Ages, all the way into the Renaissance, and obviously people are still reading it today. He's had everything taken from him. He's been condemned to death. All he has left is his reason, his sense of self. He consoles himself that the world has worth. There is something that keeps things together. He uses his reason to get to the root of why he could be at peace with the face of death. That problem is his source of origin, is his belief in God. Now what would you do? You have nothing except your reason and your knowledge of science. Pause. Tyson. I would request that my body in death be buried, not cremated, so that the energy contained within it gets returned to the earth, so that the flora and the fauna can dine upon it, just as I have dined upon the flora and fauna throughout my life. End quote. May the explorers in all scientific fields continue their search for understanding in our universe and continue to share their knowledge with all of us. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, Jim, that was just terrific.
That was outstanding.
Thank you.
You are an excellent reader speaker. That was really,
Well,
really good.
I wish it were not my allergy season.
Yeah, it's bothering me. You really have clarified the whole idea of this irreducible complexity.
Oh, I'm glad it did.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that
it
is
really
very confusing.
Yeah,
Really
it is.
is. I had to look it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard it, and every time I hear it, I have to think, now what
Yeah.
are they trying to say again?
Yeah.
And when it's presented by a sharp creationist,
Yeah, they can double talk with the best of them.
Oh,
can't
yeah,
they?
they're very good.
yeah.
It was shortly after I had read that one about the irreducible complexity of a mousetrap that I put a toilet paper tube at the end of the counter with peanut butter in it and a jar on the floor. And I got up the morning and there was a mouse and a toilet paper roll in the jar.
Wow.
So
That's pretty
how much
cool.
simpler could it be?
Oh,
If you don't
That's
include
neat.
That is
gravity, that
incredible.
was three
That's
parts.
fine.
I mean, maybe you could count the counter. I don't know. Elevation, gravity.
You added
But-
gravity to this. No more.
You should.
Peanut butter, a toilet paper tube, and a big jar. And
Oh, that's
Well, I
great.
guess what I don't know, I never understood how a mousetrap was the stand-in for life and living things.
Who
and the
does?
whole-
Who
But
does?
I was like, what does that have to do with anything?
They always take
And I'm not sure why
something
we-
and make a jump.
Yeah.
And if and if
It's
you don't
false
know
logic.
science
Or, yeah.
well enough, which most of us don't, it sounds like half plausible.
Well, even
Oh,
if you
very
know
plausible.
logical thinking,
Yeah.
it's not,
No.
you're drawing conclusions.
Many of
that
their
are
things
from-
do that, yes.
Yeah.
Many of their expressions.
But
And
they're
honestly,
very
that-
dangerous.
honestly, that was somewhat convincing to me when he's talking about the mousetrap. He's saying,
See?
well, you need to have
Right,
a spring because something's got to
right.
move. And well, yeah, that's true. You've got to have something to hold it. You've got to have magnification of force, a trigger, the
Right.
hairpin.
The force.
The toilet paper roll.
And the
And the peanut butter, it's a new use of the peanut paper roll.
Worked like a charm.
That's good.
And I was sort of convinced by it, but then again, my whole life is starting out with ideas and distilling them and bringing them to their simplest
Mhm.
form. So invention
Yes.
is almost like you get to the simple
Yeah.
thing, and people look at it and go, but it's simple. Yeah, but you started, right? What is the essence?
Yeah, knowing your background, I thought that you might
Yeah,
get on that right away.
but I was pretty convinced by his mousetrap argument.
See, I always look at those and I'm like, I know this isn't right,
Yeah.
but I'm not smart enough to
See,
explain
that-
why it's
Yeah,
not
That's
yeah.
why they
Yeah.
get away with
And
it.
you feel
That's
yourself,
why they get away with it.
I don't lean toward their side, I just smack myself in the head
And
because
think
I'm not
about
smart
them-
enough to figure
Think
out
about
why.
them talking to like a group of parents at a PTA meeting or something.
yeah. And there's a
You know?
decision on
Oh, yeah.
whether or not to allow some crap into your curriculum.
And now they're still doing it. Now they're doing it with strengths and weaknesses.
That's
Which
their,
they
that's
wanna
their
show
latest
the-
rallying cry.
Yeah, in which they're
Yes.
pretending is like unbiased because they're showing the strengths of evolution and the
Oh.
weaknesses.
Oh,
Yeah,
But let's
whatever.
really show the weaknesses.
what was that theory of the holes or whatever, where
The whole,
you find a hole
the
in
gaps,
the
theory
theory?
of the gaps.
Yeah.
Oh,
Theory
yeah.
of the gap, so
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very appealing because they can portray themselves as the victims of the
Yes,
scientists.
awesome.
yes,
The scientists are trying to censor them,
yeah,
and all they're trying to do is just help, by pointing out some
Yeah.
flaws. They're just trying to help
Yeah.
science.
Yeah.
They can portray themselves as, hey, we're the victims.
yeah.
Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that
Actually,
really
it's
sound
in
familiar?
our book, The Age of
Because
Reason.
religious
I wrote
people
that
continue,
down.
in the United States continuously say that people are fighting against religion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that they're
We are the
victims.
victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're always trying to take something away from us.
Yeah, and that's what Ben Stein's documentary was about. The
Mhm.
comedian who
Who's very,
went on the creationist
religious.
bandwagon. I forget the name of the
Oh,
documentary,
yeah.
but he
I saw
said,
that.
look,
Yeah.
the public schools are censoring the truth. They
That's
don't
right.
want the
That's
other
right, they
side.
don't want to let the truth in.
And the scientists are holding back their flaws that they have, and we're here to save the public
Mhm.
schools.
Yeah,
Mhm.
You talk about gaps, the first sentence of that movie.
Okay, you saw, I
Oh,
didn't.
and, yeah, and, cause it was the very first case, he says, hey, there was this scientist who submitted an article, and because he mentioned, creationism, just mentioned the word, he lost his job, he lost his pay, he
Aw.
lost his right, and so I looked the guy up,
oh, yeah.
and he was a volunteer submitting an article, but he didn't have it peer reviewed. They didn't kill his job. He still is a volunteer there, and he never was paid. So it was like every sentence that guy said
was a lie.
was a lie, and he's a smart guy, so he knows it.
Yeah.
Ben Stein is no slouch.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. So,
He
yeah, they
knows
know a lot of their lies. But see, they know that a lot of us don't, research, we don't know. I mean, how
We
many
won't
things
take
are
the
you
time.
supposed to know?
Yeah,
I mean, so we depend upon these people to tell us the
Mm-hmm.
truth, and of course they don't.
that's
It's very clever.
outsourcing truth,
Yeah,
and that's, I guess, what science is
Yeah.
all about. You hear something, and then you find out,
yes,
you look into it just a little farther. And if you don't look into it a little bit, don't bother believing it at all.
Yeah, wait,
Remind yourself
out.
that you
Yeah.
don't know that. You
Find
just
out
heard
about it.
that. Yeah.
yeah, look it up.
That's a good I don't know it, I heard it, but I
Yeah.
don't know it.
right.
So store all information with a confidence level.
Good idea.
I heard a guy say, not,
Yeah,
I read it in Scientific American, may have a little more weight, as long as you read next month's errata.
Ah,
Right,
yeah,
you're right,
that's
right.
Oh.
true too. Because there's a lot of plagiarism and false. But you know what? They're exposed, and this is the good thing about
Yeah.
science.
Oh, yeah.
They can be
Yeah.
exposed.
The people correct their honest mistakes, and the crooks are, ultimately exposed because it can't be replicated.
Tobacco.
See, this is it. Oh my gosh, we saw the Merchants of Doubt.
Merchants of
Oh
Doubt.
my
Yeah,
gosh, that's right.
yeah, and how they cast doubt on tobacco
Is that a
harming
movie?
us.
Okay,
Yeah,
off
it's a
topic.
doc.
It's off topic.
No,
Okay.
it isn't off topic because.
No, because it's science, and
because
it's related to talking about proving ideas in science,
you see,
using
what
science.
they did was create doubt. They didn't
Yeah.
have
They
to,
didn't have to prove themselves.
yeah, they didn't have to
Yeah.
prove themselves because they knew that they couldn't.
Yeah,
So all they did was like create doubt, and that's what they're doing now with climate change.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
There was a scientist
It
in
is,
the,
it's still on topic, I think.
Well, actually, and
in
it
the
is on
30s, there was a
topic.
scientist, a chemist, and goes right along with this, and he was discovered, he was in California, and he was observing that children were showing symptoms of lead poisoning, and no one would pay any attention to him. So he kept analyzing, taking blood samples all over it was coming from the gasoline.
Oh,
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Do you remember that? And it took him,
Remember that?
what, 30
Yeah.
years?
That was
Remember
in
the story.
Cosmos, Neil deGrasse
Cosmos had that. That was an episode
Yeah.
of Cosmos.
Yeah, that
How
was
stupid could they
really,
be to
well,
not to think
it's
that?
very easy.
Well, but your thing about doubt, when you started talking about the wedge, I was like, what's that? I've never heard of that. So of course I'm looking it up
That's
online.
important.
Oh my gosh! And one of their tenets is to create doubt.
Doubt,
Yeah.
That
exactly.
is absolutely one of their
Yeah.
But reading their manifesto, I guess
Oh,
I would
yeah.
call it. I had never heard. I was like, oh my, this is terrifying.
You know what's remarkable about it is that they actually posted it
Yes.
online, and yet they were claiming that they were science, and they
Right.
actually said things like, "This is really more about society than science. It's more about
But they created. There was that part of another
Yeah.
one of their goals was
Yeah.
to actually do research.
Yes.
Now and then, of course, I started looking. I'm like, so do we have any papers? Do we have this? And there was an example of them citing their research and someone saying, so you're basically bringing it back to evolution and
Yeah.
proving it, and they shut up and shut the whole
Yeah.
thing down.
Yeah.
But my question is about the research, and I didn't get this far or whatever. But of course, in this wedge website, they also, I went to another thing about the wedge. They talked about their research institute, biological something, and then they said that some of the critics, even within the religious community, are saying, wait, this isn't the be-all, end-all research. And they named a list of these research institutes. So I was stunned that there was actually a list of, religious, I don't want to call it religious research, but religious people trying to claim research. So my question is, where's all the biological one? They said they did it in secret, so people couldn't question, which I'm thinking, well, there's no peer review there.
Exactly.
But where would you find all the research of these multiple research organizations that are trying to, I guess, prove intelligent design? I don't know what they're, or disprove evolution.
If you want to spend the time that the researchers did earlier, and are mentioned here in the paper, there's no publications. They have their
peer reviewed.
yeah, they have their own publications, but they're never in the regular science journals
But what
because they
publications
can't
are they
get
in?
in, they can't get
Of
into the
course
science
They're
journals.
in their own organizational.
organization.
So
Their
they
own
publish their own
Right.
Oh, I see what you
research
mean.
journals.
Yeah, they have their own
Okay.
things,
So the only
and they
place,
publish them,
Okay, so
and
the
they
only
publish their own books.
place you would find it is there.
And
Right.
So
they,
the research is out there.
Right.
yeah,
But you would have to, again, going back to the beginning part we were talking about, you would have to, again, be smart enough to be able to piece through their
Exactly.
fallacies.
yes, and you can look it up.
It's not
A
easy.
way to start getting into that is to go to their online and look for conferences, creationist conferences,
Ah,
and intelligent design conferences. They have them,
Okay.
and they get turnouts for it.
Well, I figured that.
Oh
but-
yeah,
And so,
and they will from there you can find out if there are any publications of baloney.
which I'm almost afraid to read it because I'm afraid I'll read it and accidentally think I know it because I get confused. So I'm almost afraid.
Here's a flag, if there's no comment section underneath,
Right. Right.
like you can say, oh, but you made a mistake there. They don't want,
No, they don't want to know that.
So I've never read the panda thing. I've seen the book.
Pandas and people.
Yeah,
pandas
and
and
that's
people.
actually the textbook my
Yeah,
stepkids
that
are
is
studying.
so
I know it's scary.
bad.
But my question is there anything in there? Is there anywhere that if we are this intelligent design and if we go by there, what explains in their theory, what explains disease, illness, imperfection, and all that stuff? Why would an intelligent designer design that way?
Those are
what's-
the trials of life that you are put through in order to demonstrate your faith.
That's literally what they say, or are you just
They
being
won't.
sarcastic?
They won't say that.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, I figured.
What do
would
they say?
it.
What's
Yes.
their answer to that?
Yes.
I couldn't even begin to tell you.
Okay. Because that was kind of a curiosity as you're going through this. I'm thinking,
Look it
you were
up.
talking about you're supposed to ask questions and all the benefit of science and all this
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm thinking to myself, which questions are they not asking because there is no answer? Or
Mm-hmm.
the answer, it doesn't make sense with their other claims of intelligent
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
I mean,
in this concept of, you said manufacturers of doubt, or what? Merchants of
Merchants
doubt?
of
Merchants
doubt,
of doubt, yeah.
Maybe you can help me with, I heard a quote somewhere and it was like, anti-something isn't pro anything. That's like a fundamental problem that people have, is if I disprove evolution, that doesn't mean creationism is true. It
Yeah.
just means
That's not
this isn't
The
true.
given
Yeah.
opposite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the anti-something is not pro
That's a
anything,
good point.
but they treat it like it is. If
Of
I
course.
just say you're a liar,
Mhm.
I mean,
Very
was that I don't know who said that, or have you ever heard that
I
before?
haven't
No.
heard it.
Well,
But
then let's put my name
I
on
think
the
I've
end of
heard
it.
that one before, yes.
Yeah,
Very interesting. Norm?
The animation that you mentioned of the adaptable mousetrap, where would we find that?
Go to AtheistScholar.org,
Okay,
into the bibliography of this lecture, and it's in the bib
okay, great.
as a link.
That would be fun to watch. You know, one of the problems I think with people, common folk, understanding evolution is that it defies their own day-to-day folk biology of how they think the world works. That is, you know, they know that a baby grows up to be a larger person, but they're never able to see, you know, evolution in action. They can't witness it firsthand.
Yeah.
Well, they can't witness a germ
There's a lot of
either, I
things
guess they
we
can with a
can't.
microscope, but
But-
still.
But that speaks to the point, is that they're not denying the germ theory. I guess at one point maybe people did, but today, even though people can't see germs, they're not denying it because they don't have any other counter evidence to the contrary. But in the case of telling someone that we share a common ancestor with a chimpanzee, their everyday experience would say, how could that possibly be? I don't see anybody, you know, getting less hairy or whatever. I don't see some older people acting more like a chimpanzee and younger people acting less like a chimpanzee.
Well, and their
So-
leaders tell them too, that,
Yeah.
you know, well, then why are there still chimpanzees today?
So in their day-to-day existence, just a common man or woman, I can understand some of that. It's like, oh, I don't get this. I don't see this anywhere in the world of what you're telling me.
Yeah,
There was in right along with what you're saying, there was an interview with Dawkins and I can't remember her name now. She's a well-known creationist and intelligent design person.
oh, yeah,
And it's on YouTube, and she's asking him questions about, you know, but you know, about evolution and so forth, you know, like, you don't have, where's your proof? About every other
She
sentence she would
kept
say,
saying that to him.
where's your proof? He said, well, I would like to take you to a museum and show you, you know, the progress of the you know, the evolution. But that was all, everything was down at one time. So where's your proof of that? Where's your proof that these bones, you know, how do we know that? And he starts to say, well, I can show it to you. You know, it's there for you to see. And I could take you through the museum, important thing. And it just, you know, went this around business. But and she was always going back to that expression, you know, of where's your proof?
What was she trying to say, that the museums were claiming something
Yeah,
that
that's,
wasn't
I
true?
don't see that.
yeah,
or
yeah.
that if he doesn't
Yeah.
have it in his pocket,
Yeah, or
it's
see,
not
if
true.
he didn't have it right that minute, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But you know, we always look too at are we related to chimpanzee, you know, whatever, or do we have primate
Yeah,
history?
we sure do.
And we always talk about it in terms of physique, like hair, like
Yeah, yeah.
prominent brows or something
Yeah.
like that. But doesn't behavior kind of show itself? Has anybody been watching the news lately? I mean,
Yeah.
people susceptible to hive mind that just give over their individual thought and turn into this animalistic crowd that
Well, we share
That was
1%.
in, that
What
was
do we
in our-
share? 2%, 98%, don't we, with the
Yes.
chimpanzees?
Yeah,
And Jake-
a whole bunch, very high percentage.
It's
No.
about 98%,
It's in the 90s,
isn't it?
87,
The brain book,
90%.
but I read a related brain book it was in.
So that's a case for evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
Really what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
That's why I see evolution is supported by psychology, by genetics, by behavior, by physical anthropology or whatever, by
I'm not much of
so
an
many
evolutionary
things, geology
psychologist.
and plate tectonics, and you've got to cancel or deny all these different fields to say, no, it was creationism.
Well-
Or, you know, what were the fossils that were at the top of the mountain because when the flood came, they all
Oh, that
climbed
was
to
so
the top.
funny.
You know
And
what
you-
though, Greg? Back up for a minute on the whatever.
Evolutionary
Evolutionary
psychology, I don't like it.
One of the, let's think for a minute, because let's talk about testable and all that stuff. We might find a fossil. We might find a series of fossils. Two things are never gonna happen. We're never gonna find a brain. And we still to this day, we couldn't, even if we can figure out how to test what's going on in our own brains, we could never, ever, ever test what was going on in the brain of any of our ancestors or
Thank
any
you.
animal.
Thank you,
Thank
that's
you
So
very
important.
while,
much.
and that was something that I read in the
Yeah.
second book from the Telltale, remember I said I read a related
Yeah,
book
yeah.
after that?
Oh.
And, cause that Telltale brain really left me toward the end with a bad taste in my mouth. And this other book, that's what this author brought out, that kind of, for me, it was like, that's why I had a bad taste, back to I don't know why I don't like it.
Yeah, but
And-
if
and
something,
that's-
if something hits you right.
That's
That's
my,
exactly good stuff
now,
there.
do I think that of course there's probably some evolutionary thing with our brain? Well, if there's an evolution of the rest of us,
Of
there's
course.
some common sense.
Yes.
But can we ever prove it, and should we be making claims about it since
No.
we can't prove it? I don't think, we might, make some guesses or make some, but unless we
Yeah.
can test it, calling it a science and calling it anything,
I agree, I don't
Well,
think
yeah,
it
yeah.
is at all.
Ants.
I
mean,
don't
Go
think at
north.
all.
E.O. Wilson spent most of his career on ants,
Yes.
studying ants,
yes.
and how do they relate to human civilization. And so some things are actually testable.
And those that are great, but we still
But
can't.
he's really more of an evolutionary biologist and not an evolutionary psychologist.
He
so
paved,
that's
he
the
paved the
difference.
way though, but no,
Yeah.
there's a direct lineage between him.
Well, yeah, but
and the
they
today-
took a big jump.
They had to take a
Yeah.
jump on
They-
it.
They took a
Slowly-
great deal of imagination.
They,
So-
they give college students these multiple choice tests, and then they say, oh, well, so then this is common, and it was common, what are they
Right.
talking
But they're
about?
testing white Americans,
Yeah.
not
College
college
kids on
for
top
who?
of it.
College in
Yeah,
Africa?
it makes
Probably
no
not. I mean,
sense
that was,
whatsoever.
and that was one of the, and that actually Jacoby brought that,
Mhm.
Jacoby?
Yeah, Jacoby.
Jacoby
As
in
far
the
as
Age of Reason kind of brought some of that out too, about, now I just totally lost my train of thought on that. It was back to the ants thing, but I don't remember it now, so never mind.
So, but to your point, that kind of takes those statements of, we behaviorally used to act like this, or our brains
Yeah.
used to be like that, to the same exact realm as the irreducible complexity of a mousetrap. Because it's plausible, but it's not. With a mousetrap, I can prove there's a simpler one.
You
Yeah.
did.
But, yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Well, gravity was involved.
that's
but-
funny.
But with the behavior, it still is, and then now you're saying this, and I'm thinking of all the stuff we had read, and it is, you hear claims, there's no way, there's so many of them, there's no way you can verify all of them.
That
But
junk
it
science,
makes a
that's what
plausible
Jacoby.
whole.
Remember
Yeah.
Jacoby's
Junk
whole thing on
science.
junk
Yeah, yeah.
science and talked about eugenics? That's
Yeah.
they were making a
Yes.
plausible
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were. It's completely
That was
plausible.
Science, yeah.
But it's junk, and that
It's
to
junk.
me is the
Science.
equivalent of a lot of today's brain science
Yeah,
and what they're trying to
evolutionary
evolutionary
psychology.
psychology is to me. I think there's probably some junk science getting.
And
There's an awful lot
neuroscience.
of
Now I
neuroscience.
find out how much I
neuroscience
do
too,
that in my
because-
life. Thanks a lot. I thought I was a smart guy.
Well, they,
Apparently,
Well, I mean, we all do. That's
I
you
guess
know,
we do. We all got
what
blind
they-
spots.
what they do,
Some of
they
us are-
also say, like, this is how the society was organized back in the Stone Age. How do they know? We
We're
know
off
they had some
topic.
tools,
We're off topic.
I mean, we don't
Yeah.
know anything about them. And then they say, well, the human
But
brain
no.
hasn't evolved, it hasn't had time to evolve past that era. But we're finding that evolution is taking place much quicker than we thought.
Yeah.
So they're already being put in the trash can,
And
really.
it is on
Bye.
topic because we're back
Splash.
to one of the things we
Swish.
have to be careful of people that are advocating for science versus intelligent design is we got to be careful to not be jumping on the stupid science bandwagon or the junk
Yeah.
science bandwagon
Yeah.
because we're no better than the
Yes.
ideas if we do that.
And
Yes.
neuroscience
That's
is
back
a
to the
good
point.
Neuroscience that you said is a good point because neuroscience it's in the infancy. Colin McGinn, who's like really good at neuroscience and he's a philosophy expert. And he says that keep remembering that it's in the infancy of its,
Right.
development. We don't know crap yet.
Yeah.
And he knows a lot more than the rest of us know. I mean, and he
But
said,
maybe-
we just don't know crap.
Maybe it's ego, but if you have had a lifetime of skeptically approaching life,
Sure.
and you've come to find some things as true, and you have high confidence that these things are true, and more stuff comes on that's consistent with that, you may still verify,
Yeah,
but you build a worldview over time.
well, of course, yeah.
And so, although we may all have blind spots, some of us are totally blind. I guess I just don't think of us as those guys, Totally blind is just this guy said who was standing on a podium.
Yeah,
That's it, that right there, that's truth.
We're
Now, I'm gonna
done.
live my life by what?
We read the Telltale Brain, and that told us that we're done. That's it. Everything in that book was gospel.
Here's how much under I am.
well,
I
this
realize
is
how
what's
much I do that
scary,
now that
this
you
is
said
what
that.
is scary about atheists, some of them. Because they don't believe in God, and then they think that they're like wiser than everybody else.
Yeah.
And then they adopt these, then they
you're right,
adopt
you're right.
these screwy ideas.
I think it's
Yeah, we
really
we have to keep in mind
Norm wants to
that one of
stop.
the tenets of science is healthy skepticism.
Yes.
We have to keep what scientists work with
Yeah.
is healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
We have to keep
And
that.
ID has
and
no
be,
healthy
be
skepticism.
accepting of
No,
that. As
no.
you said, we may not be aware because it's been working for us all our whole lifetime, but it may not be true. And we have to. And who wants to say I've been wrong?
And nobody in ID is saying,
Yeah.
this might not be true.
It's
Well,
not-
no, because you know why? I mean, because they have this agenda, and it's.
Well,
and
yeah,
they
the
don't-
wedge thing,
Yeah,
that's
they
just
don't give a
amazing.
shit. Yeah, I know. They tell everybody that.
Oh my
They posted
gosh.
it ages ago on the web, and people still accepted what they were saying as science. And Philip Johnson said, "This isn't really about science." He actually said that. It was right on the web. When I was doing research
Who's
in
Philip
that
Johnson
area,
again?
he's one of their leaders.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he is their absolute
One of the
contender,
founders.
one of their
Okay.
founders. I said, he's saying this is not so much about science. Hello, people. I mean, here it is.
Well,
on-
look at the wedge.
the
Go
web.
back and look at the wedge again. All about
Yeah.
public opinion, getting the politicians on your side. See, it's all,
Norm wants
where's
to
the
talk.
science, Norm? Please.
Jim, did you find any non-Christian sources for intelligent design, such as Islam or Judaism?
I didn't go that far.
Question.
I didn't. That's that. Now you want another lecture?
Yeah.
Yeah,
ID and
Yeah.
whatever. How other
Well,
religions? Wow.
creationism is spreading now, and Islam has been adopting it. But they got this corruption from us.
Well, but they're at
Yes.
least still one of the Abraham. I mean, they're still in the same Bible
Yeah.
we use.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what if we branch out to the non-Muslims, non-Jewish,
Well,
non-Christians?
according to Ronald Numbers, it's spreading in Europe even.
Okay,
And that came
Creationism.
from the
Creationism.
same idea
I'm talking about
of
Buddhists
sending out the
or-
missionaries. The same concept.
same concept.
They have done that. They have used that. The intelligent design people and the creationist people have sent people. They have money.
I'm
They
talking
sent
about
people to
outside of
Europe
that religion.
and putting in the idea working with Muslims.
Okay, well, if you
Yeah.
go to Japan,
Oh,
they
yeah.
don't have any. This would be so. My question
That I
is,
don't know.
how would they? Are they just relying on the fact that if they convert a certain mass that they'll hit a tipping point and the rest of they'll have to take over the rest
I
of
don't
the
know.
world?
You know, the Japanese
Because
have
Chinese,
dumped, they've even
Japanese-
dumped the Buddhists now. So I don't know what the Japanese believe currently.
Probably science.
That's possible.
Yeah, I
That's
think
what
the
keeps them
argument
afloat.
is in some ways uniquely American, that it seems like in the United States, this is the focal point or the fault line between the creationism and evolution.
Oh yeah,
Which is
It's
spreading
bad.
through missionary like
Yeah.
behavior,
Yeah.
and I would buy that. But
Yeah.
there's got to be a wall that it can't cross because you can't
Yeah.
convince Japanese people who don't even believe in our creationist story in the first place that there's an intelligent designer if they don't even believe in a supreme being.
But they
How
also
are you going to
believe
convince all the
they
Indians?
believe that that these souls have existed for and that's how you have transmigration of souls. So I don't think it would be that hard. They think that they've existed somewhere. You know, pre-existing like
I'm
forms
just,
and souls.
I'm just saying though, at some
Yeah,
point
you
there's
would,
going to
we
be a
would
wall.
really have to look at that. Yeah.
I gotta say, this is such a rich topic, and it's like hard, it is hard to stay.
When you
Yeah.
start branching,
On-
well, that's
on,
on
you know,
topic.
Yeah.
But if I could ask somebody irreducible complexity
say the word.
again, and I don't even know if it's just as limited to that, because it may be the wedge and everything, but Jim, in your concept, is it a problem of creativity, or a problem of confirmation bias, or a problem of assuming a conclusion and then supporting it?
Isn't that
I
confirmation?
mean,
think it's
because
number
like the
3.
problem with creativity, like I had a friend who says, "Hey, you can't have love without God," and I say,
Oh,
"You've
I
got
hate
children,"
that.
and I
oh,
say,
I see.
I'm like, "Well, you've got children. Are you telling me you could think of no possible way that you would love them if you didn't believe in God?"
Yeah,
I mean, when you look at your child,
yeah.
I think that's the lack of creativity, and that's
Must be
kind of
why
why I
have
asked.
children.
Because irreducible complexity, if you really look at the problem, you can solve it. But they stop. They say, no, it. So is it
That's
creativity,
correct. That the
confirmation,
end
bias?
product
I never
is,
understand
you,
how they can
if you
argue
can't
with
answer the question, it belongs to God. And Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, has a whole lecture on intelligent design through history.
Ooh.
And scientists who actually came to a point where they could not go any further because they didn't have the development of the mathematics, or they didn't understand a certain law, they couldn't break into it. Even they went to that and said, well, it must be God.
And then a miracle occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
The
then,
breakthrough?
but then
Yeah.
the next one comes along 100 years later or 50 years later, scientist, and he says, aha, you need this style of mathematics, this form of physics. And he solves, or she solves the problem. And then they take it so far, and oh my gosh, it doesn't fit. The next step doesn't come. It has to be an intelligent
That is
design.
God of the gaps.
That's how
Yes.
the God of the
It gets us
gaps.
so
yeah.
far.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But remember that some of the ministers back then were warning them that that's a dangerous way to go, because one of them actually told them, like, when the gaps are filled in, then where's God?
Where's God?
He warned
That was
them,
a-
like,
yeah,
you don't wanna go- that's
this is
right.
not a good
A very
Well,
dangerous-
man.
Very dangerous
Well,
position.
Supposedly,
Theologically,
God
in
would be
trouble.
getting squeezed out,
Yeah.
but he's not. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish he was right, but it
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be working in our
Norm,
favor.
you
Well,
have some
he's being
anxiety. You were
pushed.
trying to get a point on.
Anxiety, me?
Yeah.
I think also, this is a comment, that the backlash against evolution and towards, say, creationism is because of this anti-intellectualism,
Yeah.
that the scientists and the professors and even the biology teachers are sort of held in sort of a grudging view of, say, again, I'm thinking of this, the average person
Yeah.
who's doesn't have a college degree, and these people are supposed to be an authority. Well, if they don't like that, if they sense this imbalance of power, they may take that out and say, well, you're wrong, you just think you know it all, but
Yeah.
God is the one who knows it all.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a classism and also an anti-intellectualism.
Yeah,
saying,
good point.
Susan
I feel
Jacoby
inferior
again.
Yeah.
to the scientist. I feel inferior to the scientist. Therefore, I don't like what he's saying.
Yeah.
I think that's driving that
Yeah, that's a good
as
point.
well. You know, here, at least here in the United States.
Well, and it's hard for them to understand it too.
yeah, it's hard.
And anything is hard to understand.
Well, it may or may not be. I mean, I think put in the right way, like with Cosmos
Yeah.
and these other popular programs,
Mhm.
I don't think it's that hard to understand. Really, I mean, a dog. How could all these different dogs come from a wolf, from the wolf family? How do we get all these other dogs? You know, they understand the idea of selective breeding.
Yeah.
Unnatural
Any-
selection.
They do, yeah.
You know, a kid
Yeah.
would understand that. You can
Yeah.
breed a dog
Yeah.
to be this or to be that,
Mhm.
whatever. The other point I wanted to make is, you know, we should also congratulate ourselves, because in some ways, ID represents a victory for atheism, because what it really says is they've surrendered the Bible. They're no longer going to use
Good
the
point.
Bible as their
Good
defense,
point.
you know, against atheism. They're gonna
That's a
say,
really good
okay,
point.
we're not gonna argue
Good point, John.
specificity and say God created man, you know, on the sixth day and rested. We're not gonna say that. We're gonna give us this convoluted argument, but nevertheless, they've surrendered their
Good
biggest
point.
tool that they had throughout history, which is, you know, the
Chapter and verse.
the chapter and verse, and you say, okay, we won't talk about that anymore, about how Adam and Eve were created, you know, Eve from Adam's rib and all that. We'll put that aside because we're not being taken seriously.
Well,
So I feel it's a victory that ID
Can you
had to come-
reconcile that with the ID? Can you reconcile the rib thing with ID anywhere?
no,
No.
no.
Old barbecue
They-
sauce.
see,
Well,
but
the old
remember,
things were missing the
they
rib.
were also not saying, you know, when they started out, they weren't saying, even though like Johnson, I think, is a Catholic, isn't he? And I think a lot of them are, you know, different religions and what have you. I think one is even a Scientologist, but they didn't say God. They said, well, it could be, you know, again, that outer space thing. They said, you know, we can't specify what it could be, but it's some kind of design or some kind of something
Well,
that put
wouldn't-
something in place.
They
So
go
were
back to
very
the primary is always a designer.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
the fact that all of the the Christian schools, the private schools, all of them use this as their textbook, be the prima facie argument for this has to be God? I mean, if they
Yes,
didn't think that
they
was
did.
God, then they wouldn't have that
They did,
textbook.
but those guys were clever because, like Norm, you know, said that, you know, they're not using the Bible; they're using science.
They can't
so to speak.
openly,
See, we're
I understand that, but
scientists.
what I'm saying is, by virtue of the fact
Yes.
that this is the chosen book
Sure.
of this, they are saying
Hey,
it's a
yes.
God. They're
It's
saying it's
implicated.
God.
Yes.
They are saying they wouldn't simply adopt a book about some nebulous, intelligent designer that could be an alien. If they were staunch fundamentalist
Yeah.
Christians that believed in God,
Yeah.
they absolutely believe that the intelligent designer is God.
So they're
If
saying
I'm
it's a
fiction's
magical
a-
Of
being,
course.
but you
Yes.
decide which one it is.
They're not
Yeah.
saying that.
They're not.
Yeah, see, they were very
In the
clever.
other class, they tell
Well,
you which
in
one
the
it
public
is.
schools, that's
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
But if the religious schools,
Oh, sure.
Christian religious
Well,
schools
they're
are
straight
adopting
out.
it, there's absolutely no way
Straight
that they
up,
would adopt
yeah.
that book
Well,
if
that
they didn't
is-
think the intelligent designer was
true.
God.
I
That
agree.
book is so bad that it was poorly edited. Remember?
Oh yeah,
all that?
I was reading that
And
online.
Barbara
Oh, did you catch
Morris
that?
caught them. It was
Yeah.
That came out in the
said, like,
trial. That came out in the
creation
trial
instead of
also, yes.
intelligent design.
That was awesome.
But she went through,
changed it.
yeah, she went through all that. It, you know, it was people like that that really are, I think, heroes for the point of evolution not being,
Yes.
you
The thing
know.
to me that muddies the whole thing, and they're attempting to step into the scientific realm,
Yeah,
but you have two systems of thought that are so
Incompatible.
opposite.
yeah.
This one values evidence above
See,
all
this is the
else.
thing.
This one requires lack of evidence. If you have evidence, it's not faith. You definitely
Very
must
good.
not have evidence.
Very good point.
Because if you were allowed to have evidence, God would just prove he was real and we'd all be
Yeah.
believers. So it's required that you don't have evidence. This requires that you do have evidence. And then when they start walking into each other's worlds, you know, you can't use this thought system to prove that one
No.
because they're
And
opposites.
vice versa.
So
Well, also too, don't forget that science will change when presented with different
That's
evidence.
very,
and more
thank you
evidence.
for
Yes,
bringing that in.
yeah. And you
and
did bring that
religion
up in your
Very
lecture.
Won't
important.
change, I mean,
Right.
because you can't change if you,
yeah, I
if
think you said
you're
all
based on
conclusions
faith.
are tentative.
Yeah,
That was something
all
I thought was
conclusions are
up there.
tentative, that's really important.
but when you say science change, you're really talking about scientists have to change.
Change.
Mhm.
Well,
So
sure,
if
the
a
paradigm,
Yeah, if a scientist has made his
Yeah.
career out of publishing,
he
say,
won't.
one specific theory, it's really hard for that
Stephen
scientist
Yeah,
Extremely
the
hard.
one
to
science,
change
but the,
given new evidence.
eventually
unemployed
that
then.
paradigm.
Now
is
you're
when
into
they
the
yield to
politics
another
and
one.
the reality of the science, in the
That's the
scientific
reality.
field,
Yeah.
that person has been with that idea from that perspective for 30 years, as well as so many of his colleagues.
Yes.
And you almost have to wait, sorry guys, for them to pass away.
Yeah.
Who
in order
wrote
for
that,
the
who
Oh, I've
wrote
new
seen
that
ideas to take
paradigm,
in.
who
Yeah,
wrote
fair.
that, was it Niels Bohr,
It was earlier than that. I know science advances one funeral at a time.
Yeah, yeah,
right,
it's-
exactly.
That's,
yeah,
oh, that's
it's
a
the
good one,
paradigm,
yes, that's
yeah.
it.
I think it's
Well, I
early.
think Arthur Clarke said it in Childhood's End that at a certain point in your life, your circuits are irrevocably committed
You've got it,
Oh,
to
that's
their
interesting, yeah.
programs. And,
yeah, you've got it.
and that's why as humanity was evolving, people after a certain age just couldn't go. It had to be
Yeah,
the younger ones with
yeah, it
clean
usually
slate
is.
theory. So you had mentioned something about, and now this may have to do with evidence, lack of evidence, these two thought systems. You said, how does intelligent design deal with evidence for evolution? I mean, because there's so much of it. I know you're probably just gonna say they ignore it, I don't know, but can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, when they hear it, what do they do with it?
I have no idea.
You know, we
They
got a
ignore,
series of
I
Well,
can
they
tell you
say
what they
there's
do
not
with it.
enough.
They go immediately back to their faith.
Okay, so they ignore the facts.
Well,
Of
they say
course.
that there's not
They-
enough proof. They say
That's
that the
where's the
fossil
proof?
record isn't filled in.
Where's your proof?
They say
The
that
God
we
of the
don't
gaps.
have a real positive reason for the Cambrian explosion.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Norm.
And that Darwin had doubts, so they always trace
Yeah.
it back to
Oh,
Darwin.
I saw that.
Darwin.
He
He was a guy.
Well, even Darwin
Yeah.
had doubts.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, there's a
of
book.
course- I hope so.
Yeah.
He's a scientist.
He's a
He should
guy.
be asking himself
Yeah.
questions.
So but they use him
As-
specifically as
And
if
if he
there's no
didn't
other
have doubts,
scientist.
he'd be God
Yeah.
because he'd had the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah,
But also,
So I'm God? Is that what you're?
Darwin's God.
you may have heard of the fossilized boot. So they say, no, the fossils aren't really that old because if you throw a boot into a lake, the bottom of the lake, it will fossilize in 100 years.
yeah, I haven't
That's what
heard
they
that
claim.
one, but that's great.
Who's been around to test that?
They
That's
can pull
great.
out boots 100 years ago.
That's
sure.
funny as
Yeah.
hell. Oh,
Is
yeah.
it
So,
fossilized?
no, it isn't, but I don't
How do you
have
know
all
it was
the
in there 100
specific.
years?
But you can date the materials.
You could date them.
So,
yeah.
but no, they attack carbon dating too. Jim,
Oh,
you didn't know
terribly.
that. They
Oh,
attack
my
every
infos,
evidence
Oh,
Every piece of evidence.
directly, and they say,
Yeah.
no, the carbon dating is wrong as well.
Yeah, they do.
Uh,
They say that.
You know, what else would they say? That there's not enough, there's gaps in the fossil
yeah,
record.
that's
Um,
great.
and I'm gonna have to think for a minute.
Don't forget the Cambrian explosion.
Yeah, that it wasn't really an explosion.
Yeah, and you know, we don't really have we don't know exactly why it took place, but there's a lot of good hypotheses about it, and we're gonna know the answers. See, the thing
Sometime.
that they won't accept is that we find out the answers through science.
And their world of gaps shrinks.
Most
Well,
of
yes.
the time. Now, we're not gonna
Shrinks.
find out everything.
Well, the second law of thermodynamics,
Oh, yeah,
that evolution violates entropy. Is that the second law?
yeah.
That
Yeah.
evolution violates
That's an old argument,
the
yes.
tend towards randomness, because you can't have things coming together by themselves, basically.
But a lot of energy is added to the system
You have to have energy in
through
the
the
system,
sun.
and they say it's going to dissipate
Yeah.
so that these new lives couldn't evolve. So yeah, it's
You
all.
know, my thermodynamics professor was a minister,
Oh, my God.
and he offered us an optional lecture on Saturday.
Oh yeah, you told us about this.
And so you never turn down a professor
Right,
when he said it's optional. It's
yeah,
not really.
yeah, you know.
But that was my question to the guy. If you had the faith of a single mustard seed, could you break the second law of thermodynamics? And the whole hush falls over the class. And people are like, what did you just say? And the preacher slash teacher's silent for, gosh knows how long. And he's trying to come up with I guess the short answer would be yes, but I know if I said that on a test, I would fail the class. So
Yeah.
it was he's trying to explain to us how he allows these two systems to be in his life, but that simple question just disarmed the poor guy. Nice enough guy.
They really
but-
rely on people to be stupid in their classes. Don't
Well,
they?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions that atheologists ask, like, I mean, they're funny, but I mean, they're true too, like, can God make a boulder too heavy for him to lift?
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't even know there was a thing as atheologist.
yeah,
That's a thing.
Well, that's the new thing.
that's,
Theology.
yeah,
Neil-
The
some
scientists of
people
not
use
believing.
it and some people don't.
Okay.
And
in my kitchen.
Are you
And
an
like once
atheist?
God has put his program in place, since he's a completely moral being, could he program someone to be a rapist? Can he create a rapist? Well, no. So you see, you get back around to the fact that he's not omnipotent.
He created Satan.
Yeah, he
He's not
can't
supposed to.
create
the
his
whole-
own.
Yeah, but they've just changed the interpretation. They've just every time someone comes up with those arguments,
I
you have
know,
all
they-
your apologists
I
there
know, they
that have
just go
thought
ahead.
very creative responses.
Yeah, they always
They're
do.
brilliant.
They always do.
They are brilliant, actually.
They are.
Yeah.
I know. You can never win an argument.
And
You're
they
like,
waste the
I'm not
time
brilliant.
of our philosophers enormously.
Well, yeah, I think your point toward the end of this is that we have so many real problems. I mean, heck, anybody can say that about us. Why are we
Yeah.
sitting around having this conversation
Well, yeah,
when we
but
could be out
still.
doing real
Yeah,
things?
well.
But no, you say and that is the best point. It's like, boy, is a lot of energy being wasted on this thing that absolutely does not advance mankind in any way, shape, or form,
That's right.
other than, their potential spiritual crap.
Are we gonna see any new battles like Dover, or do you think it's done for the most part, these battles with the schools?
No,
Trying to
Did
teach
they try
everyone?
it'll never end.
You think
Did,
it'll never end?
It will never end.
I was trying to look
As
into
long as
Dover.
they're
Did
there, it will never end.
Oh,
I
the judge
haven't
called
heard-
them everything.
No, I know.
but
What I was
lies.
trying to look
that's-
is, did they
that's why
try
I
to appeal
mentioned-
it to the Supreme Court and it got rejected, or they just
I
ended
can't
it
remember,
there?
did they?
That's
no,
why I
his-
mentioned Americans
His
United.
decision, I think, in that
For the separation of
particular,
church
yeah,
and
I don't
state.
know exactly
Their
the legal thing,
publication
but
has-
it had a stand there.
Once a month, they come out with a publication, a magazine, and in the front, they list the most pressing contemporary, current issues this month,
Americans United?
Americans
Yeah,
United, this
oh
month.
my gosh.
And there's about 10 of them, and they're brief paragraphs, they're just overviews. And there's always concerned things like putting the 10 Commandments in the State House, putting
Oh,
Yeah.
continue.
someone teaching creationism in the gym class. It's
It's
endless.
continuous, it's
Yeah.
continuous.
So once the
Yeah.
suit is brought, once you get to the point where you're gonna file a lawsuit,
They stop. Some of them stop.
Right.
that's what I would assume, that.
They
But a
push the
lot of them
envelope as
don't.
far as till they can
Yeah.
get away with it, and then
Many of
someone
them
has
do
to
not.
stop
They
them.
go. They'll go right to court. Now they'll waste the district's money.
But
Well,
isn't the
yeah,
fresco
they-
around the front of the Supreme Court house include Moses?
I would think so.
Yeah, I would have to
Absolutely. You know
look.
who else is up there? Muhammad.
And that's on
An
the inside.
image of Muhammad.
Is it on the inside? It's on the
I
inside.
thought it was right above the front. I got frescoes on 3 sides.
Gee, I wonder where that came from.
Yeah,
An image
I've
of
been there.
You're
Muhammad.
not supposed to
and
have, why haven't they bombed
It's on
that
the outside.
building?
Equality,
they
justice
made
for
a
all.
court case to get rid of the Muhammad statue, but they failed. You know, you had said something, towards the end you were talking about rising sea levels,
Mm-hmm.
islands disappearing. Obviously, they only had gays and atheists living on them.
Right.
You got it.
But just one of the last things you said, which I thought, that their beliefs are not science-based, but based on a need to believe.
Yes.
And that concept
Yes.
of the need to believe has a basis in human nature.
Right.
This need for this thing, like, I don't know what it was, Jesse Ventura, the government of
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota.
Wrestler.
Minnesota.
And one on accidentally on the news, someone said, why doesn't he believe in religion? He said, you know, well, I mean, you guys can have it if you don't have the mental capacity to think your way out of it. And he had to apologize. you
I know, everybody
for
got
all that
mad at
stuff,
him,
but-
yeah.
But that need to believe,
Mm-hmm.
why? I mean, if we don't know, it's like making somebody stop believing is treating a symptom almost.
I think
Because
it goes.
there's
I
a
think it
root
goes
cause.
back to the hunting and the hunters and gatherers and beyond that, way back. That you have to believe that it's there. You have to, because if you didn't, you would just basically give up. But your hunger and your desire to reproduce drove us along.
To hunt, you mean, to
To hunt, to
imagine the
gather
animals
food,
there.
to feed ourselves,
Yeah.
So you
to
know,
clothe
the survival
ourselves.
of the fittest evolutionary thing, that
Sure.
we would become irrational believers.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's built
Evolution,
in
right?
almost, it's almost built in, that's what's so
Kind of
scary.
ironic.
Well, see, because Daniel Dennett explains it really well, that, and there's others, but he makes it, more clear in his, what's the hell's the name of that?
The spirit,
It's one of the books that
Not
they
spirit.
proposed for
yeah, the spell.
our book club.
Yeah, Breaking the
Breaking the
Spell.
spell.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
At the very first part, about 20, I can't remember exactly, but he's got wonderful, he's kind of put all the reasons that people, like believe in religion. And he's really like distilled most of the current ideas. But that intentionality is very important, where, because we have intention, we think that other things have intention.
Yeah.
And of course, animals and predators do, but the tree doesn't. But if the tree limb breaks and it hits me on the head, I think, I did something, or somebody did something to make that tree mad, or maybe some spirit that inhabited
Why
it.
did God do this
Yeah,
to me?
yeah. I mean, there's got to be intention. See, we're projecting all the
Yeah.
time, and we don't know. We don't know any better. And there's that other thing about the fact that we see, like, what's his name? Stuart Guthrie wrote that. Faces in the clouds. And that's, again, protection against predators, because, like they say, all right, so that movement that you thought you see the shape of an animal in the thing, if you're wrong 9 times,
Who
so
cares?
what?
Yeah.
It's no big deal. But if you're right
That
that
was
one
around
time,
Survive.
that one time, you're gonna survive.
Save your life. Yeah.
And you know, you're also probably, you're gonna reproduce probably more, and you're gonna, some of those descendants, or, you know, that you reproduce will have that ability too, and we probably, most of us all have it now. And
Paranoia.
we also
Yeah.
have the desire, yeah, paranoia.
I'm getting
And
the
we
feeling there's a
also
spider
have-
under this table and he wants to come and get me.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very easy, like, you know, to see things in
That's pretty
trees.
common, isn't it?
Yeah, and see shapes all over.
Yeah, it's also part of neuroscience as well.
Yeah,
The shape
yeah.
finding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
Face-
taken
face
me years to
Booba,
try
face,
and
the face
Kiki
thing.
versus Booba or whatever.
Yeah,
it is.
and boy, we have so, you know, that scares me, because I think, like, how do we ever dislodge it all? And maybe
Well, we
we'll
can't,
never.
but
dislodge
acknowledging
it
that
all.
it exists means that we can at least maybe mitigate it somehow.
Well, yeah, hopefully, but
But-
other people don't understand that, I mean,
Yeah,
it
but when
upsets
someone
them.
said they saw the vision of Mary or whoever, you can put that in the context.
Right.
That they cannot. Instead
Right,
of saying, maybe there's something there.
yeah,
You know, you can automatically understand that they're hallucinating.
right,
So,
right.
since now you're off topic, Norm, I
Sorry.
am gonna, I would like to bring this,
You're gonna bring it back.
I just have one
Bring it back.
and maybe last thing.
Thank you.
My husband and I had this conversation the other night because he actually, he's always atheists are just as bad as religious people. It's a religion in and of itself, and the fact that there's, you know, all the things are the same. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna argue with you because you're a dumbass, but, 'cause that's but, you know, and as I said to him, I said, you know, because he's only known me since I've been more active about this. He didn't know me. I said, you know, the reason I became active in the first place, the reason I at least started being more aware or trying to learn more, was intelligent design. I was quite happy with, yep, this is what I think and I believe, but if other adults want to have their imaginary plaything, you know, and call him
Yeah.
God, whatever, as long as you're not encroaching on my world and trying to tell me what to do, but then, you know, a little bit of encroachment with right to lifers, a little bit of
Sure.
encroachment with the gay thing, a little bit
Sure.
of encroachment. And you know, that started to get really annoying and but then the intelligent design thing really kicked
Oh,
me.
boy,
That
that
was
is
it. I
awful.
was like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? I know, because people like me are just like, live and let live, and the
Well, that is
wedge,
the truth.
the wedge people are taking advantage of the live and let live.
But what in particular annoyed you, that it was gonna go into the schools?
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
gonna be
The whole
schools.
concept that, I mean, I was not, when I went to public school, there was absolutely nothing about this in there.
No,
I mean, you know, this to me was like, how did anybody even, how could they even have learned of this for heaven's sake? Because, I mean, I didn't even realize that there were these
it was
crazy.
nothing,
Yeah,
There
because
was
I didn't even
nothing
know it
like that.
existed.
no.
I was like,
nothing
my
like
that.
aunt, my
It's-
aunt is the one that
It
informed me of it, because she starts making these ridiculous arguments. I told you my aunt's a fundy. Ridiculous arguments about something, and I'm just looking at her like, you're a teacher, and what are you talking about? And then finally I actually looked at the book sheet, the Panda book, and I was like, oh my gosh,
And
this
you
is
saw
a
that.
real thing.
Yeah, I know, it's a screen.
I thought
That's-
intelligent, I didn't even know what it meant. And that's the day I got scared, and that's when I started deciding, because I could not make the intelligent arguments, because I knew what I knew, but I didn't know how to say it, and I didn't know how to dissect the things I was hearing. My aunt's making all these things, and I'm like, okay, I know you're crazy, but I don't know
I
how
don't
to
know
tell you
why.
that and make sense, which I don't,
Yeah.
because she's my aunt and I love her and whatever. You don't do that, I'm not gonna do that with family, but, you know, I can't change the insane little bitch.
Who's that, Episcopalian minister, Harry Clark, is that his name?
Oh, Harry T. Cook.
Yeah,
Here.
Cook.
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 Yeah,
Hometown.
we went to a lecture that he gave, and he said that it's continuous, and I've heard this from other people, that the efforts of the creationists are continuous, like just here in this state.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, he said he couldn't even begin to tell us. He's contacted all the time about this. They never rest.
And
They never rest, and
which
that's
is
what's so goddamn scary, because there's more of them than us.
Yes.
Yeah, quite a
And that
bit
is
more,
even-
quite a
I-
bit.
That's where I
That
started
really
getting,
freaks
and,
me.
and, you know, at least
Yeah,
my
he-
husband could understand
yeah.
that. He's like, well, that is a good reason, because he is completely horrified at his kids being taught this stuff too.
Oh, I
but-
can't, I feel
but,
sorry for him,
Yeah, so he got that, and that's why, and he was being a little crabby about all my stuff I do, and finally he's like, yeah, you're right, go do your thing. I was gonna anyways, but thanks. But yeah, so bringing it back to intelligent design, that's how I actually came into being more active
Yeah,
and coming
Oh.
out.
well,
to
it's
do this.
important,
This
it is
intelligent
important to
design.
do,
Yeah.
because, you know, they're ceaseless.
Yeah.
And now they've got strengths and weaknesses, and now they're insisting that be taught. So it's like every time we defeat them, they come up with something else that they try to get it in. It's quite amazing.
They want to
Their
take over the
persistence.
country.
Yes, they do.
I mean, they're make no
Yes, they
bones
do.
about it. They want to turn us into the next Iran or
Yes.
the next what? Because
Yes.
they or I'm sorry,
They want a-
Saudi Arabia.
they want a theocracy.
Theocracy.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
theocracy.
do.
And that's
Thank
what
you.
terrifies me
That's
too.
what's so scary.
Thank you.
It's like
I'm
you
glad
want
you
a
recognize
theocracy.
that, yes.
And you know what bothers me now? I went to a Catholic school, and I knew a lot of Catholic people, and they never acted like that.
I did too. I mean, I didn't go to Catholic school. I, knew
there
Catholic
was
people.
never anybody
And
that
I
acted
thought they were the most religious
No.
people out there,
Yeah.
the craziest ones, and turns out they're actually some of the more sane ones.
Yeah.
Are we going to turn this off now? Because
We're
we're
gonna,
now.
we're gonna clap for Jim.
Yeah. Clap, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Oh, Jim,
Outstanding.
Thank
You
you.
are a
Thank you for
backed
your
a lot
discussion.
of stuff up.
Thank you for your
really
discussion.
cleared a lot of stuff
You
up.
gave
I
me
like
things
your
to think
ideas.
about.